Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. Test, test. No. Test, test. Hello, 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 hello. I think that should be loud enough. Probably too loud, too loud. That should be about the same. All right, all right. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. As you could tell, not Jim Rowley. And along with Jim Rowley, Dan Anderson are going to be actually teaching this class, not me. But I'm subbing today because Dan's recovering and so is Jim. And so I had two ideas, and both ideas didn't seem to fit into the whole time. So I figured I'd be able to do both of them together. So the first one, that's the name of the class. If it'll do it for me. Go. Perfect. A biblical approach to parenting. That's what the name of this class is. Hopefully your desire as you're in here is to parent well. And by defining well, we want to let the Bible define what that looks like and what that means. And so I wanted to do a foreword. Now, I was going to call it an introduction, and then I realized that I wanted to try to be fancy, and I was going to call it a preface. But a preface is written by the author of the book, and I'm not going to be the one teaching the majority of this class. It's going to be Dan and Jim. And so apparently there are these things called forewords in books. And usually you get a famous person to write them. I'm not famous. But it's what you got, so we're going to do that. Now, why do I want to do a foreword? I don't know about you, but I'll talk about myself personally. Carla and I regularly talk about how we're parenting our children. We want to disciple them. We want to steward our responsibility well. And I'm going to take a really weird detour here. If you tell me to picture an apple, I cannot picture an apple in my head. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Right? I can't just be told, hey, go do this. I need somebody to show me how. Once I've seen it, then I can do it because I'll have that knowledge in my head of what it is. But before that, I'm dead in the water, right? So if I ask you to picture an apple, how many of you can actually picture an apple in your head and see it? Now, this is all new to me because Bernie and I were talking about this the other day. There's levels of which you can see the apple. Some people could picture an apple perfectly in front of them. Other people can't see anything, but they know what an apple is. Like, I know what an apple is. I don't like to eat them, but I know what it is. And I think in regards to parenting, sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you can just picture what you want to do and how you want to move your child forward, and if that's you, blessings. But that's not me, right? I know what the Bible calls me to do, but the how for me is always shaky. I grew up in a home a little bit different than most of you in that my parents were immigrants. And so I was dealing with a culture shift. I was dealing with a shift in religion. My parents grew up Catholic. My mom converted to Christianity first. My dad professed later in life. And so their view of parenting is not what an American view of parenting would be, let alone a biblical perspective on parenting. Now, they did the best that they can, and what you got here is a product of that. So I don't know if I need to apologize on their behalf or thank them. But I want to do this forward in the sense of I want us to talk about it when they're teaching about a subject that for some of us is very personal. It's difficult for many of us to ask for help for things. And it's difficult for me to admit when I'm wrong about something that I think that I'm right in. And to have somebody come alongside me and say, hey, have you considered this? Or, hey, maybe the approach you took isn't so great. My lovely wife does that on occasion for me, and it's hard for me to accept it, and sometimes I have to come back and apologize for how I responded in the moment. But, she was right. She made an observation that maybe in the heat of the moment I didn't necessarily agree with. And so, again, we're in this room because we want to steward the time that we have with our children well for the honor and glory of God, right? I think ultimately all of us in here want to glorify God in all that we do. And a large chunk of that, when our kids are in our home, revolves around that. In a way where, sometimes I wish I could just be passive. Again, if you ask my wife, she'll tell you that when I get home from work, sometimes I'm mentally tired, I'm fried. I would love to just sit on my phone and read articles or play, now it's Clash Royale, or some other silliness. But we can't. And there's a reason why we can't, or why we shouldn't, I should say, because you can, right? We all could do whatever we wanted. There's consequences to that, but the reality is that we have the options and the opportunity. It's what we choose to do that will dictate outcomes, potential outcomes. Now, when I say outcomes, I don't say you do everything right, your child is going to be a believer. I can't promise you that, right? The Bible doesn't promise you that. The Bible calls us to faithfulness, to good stewardship, but the Lord has to do the work in each of our children's lives when it comes to salvation. I will say, and Carla and I have talked about this often, usually in drives, when we go to places. We're called to faithfully disciple and instruct our kids. And Lord willing, they'll come to a saving knowledge of Christ. But even if they don't, we still bless them, right, with an understanding of what's right and wrong. And now we're not trying to raise moral children, but being moral has its benefits. The Proverbs tells us that, right? And so there's blessing there. But ultimately, I hope all of our desires are to see our children walking with the Lord. Okay, so I'm going to skip what a forward slide is, and I'm going to go to Titus 2. What does Titus 2 have to do with parenting? I would argue a lot. because it calls older men and women to pour into the lives of younger men and women. And one of the things that older men and women have is experience in raising their children. Now, they might not have the best experience, and it might be learn from my mistakes rather than learn from my accomplishments. But in the body of Christ, we're called to have that kind of relationship. And sometimes it's hard. I would prefer for people to initiate relationships with me rather than I have to go and initiate relationship with someone else. It's always easier to be on the receiving end of relationships. Oftentimes people will come to our church new, and if they don't jump in feet first and get involved in things, the mantra that we regularly hear is, I can't make friends, I can't make relationships. Now, that's not a result of them going and putting in the effort, but rather it's them wanting these things to come easy to them. And I think with relationships with older saints, with younger saints, I think it should be a two-way street, but at the same time, we can have that initiative and start to look into the lives of the people around us. We had a men's breakfast, a dad's breakfast, maybe a month or so ago, and I wanted to invite older men who've already had kids leave the home, in part because we could see the fruit of their ministry in their home. Now, obviously, within that, things can change, but you can see the faithfulness. And it was interesting because what I was doing was not necessarily looking at to where their kids were, but I was looking to how they're serving in the local church, how they're a part of our church body, and how they're relatable, how they're approachable. And hopefully the younger dads that were there were able to take advantage of talking with these older guys and starting to cultivate relationships, right? Some people want to avoid the small talk and banter of relationships, right? But I've never met anybody where I went from, hello, nice to meet you, to, hey, let me tell you all my problems and how I need you to help me. That doesn't happen. That's weird. And if it's not weird, then I'm weird, because I'm just uncomfortable doing that. We've not built a rapport. I don't know you. You don't know me. Why should I trust you? So all of this takes time, effort, and energy. It takes saying, hey, on a Sunday, instead of us going home and just going to rest, let's find somebody in the church family that we can have lunch with and get to know and build relationship with. Let's be a part of a Sunday school class or a small group. Let's go to the picnics or to the events so that we could be around these people and see how they're living their lives. If we don't do that, we can't know then whom to ask questions of. I have the privilege of working here, and one of the advantages is that I get to just pop into Brian and Gary's office and just ask random questions. Questions where, my son is 9 years old, and I don't want to badmouth him, but he's a particular young fella, and sometimes I just don't know what to do because it doesn't make sense. I don't have that same issue that he has. I don't know how to encourage him in that particular scenario. I don't know what's the best way to rebuke him, because I can't yell at him all the time. That's not going to do anything. It's going to exasperate him. We're called not to do that. So how do I train this young man who I want nothing more than to see him walking with the Lord? Whoa. How do I do that? That was weird. But I looked at Titus, and it tells me that I'm supposed to go to older men, and they're supposed to instruct me, and I have to be humble, right, to take that rebuke. It's hard, especially when you talk about discipline, because it's so personal, and we take things personally. I don't like this. Like I said, we all want to raise our kids to glorify God. And when you talk to an older person, you see your mistakes, and that's hard too. But we're called to humility, right? We're called to obedience. And hopefully what this class will be, as they said, is a practical guide to parent biblically, is that we'll hear things that might be difficult for us to swallow, that might be difficult for us to maybe implement, because we'll hear it and we'll be like, okay, but how do I do that? And hopefully we have the courage to ask those difficult questions, to say, okay, but how do I apply that? I get to coach. Coaching is fun. I mostly coach because I get to control the schedule for when they practice, because everybody wants to practice on Wednesday night. It's crazy. And when we were playing basketball, Hudson was maybe 7 and Nora was like 4. And Carla was pregnant with Monroe. And we were at a basketball practice, so Carla wasn't there. She wasn't feeling great. And I looked at the time and I was like, man, we got to go. And so I looked at Hudson and Nora and I said, grab your coats, let's leave. And I was talking with a dad. And he was floored that they actually went, grabbed their coats, and walked toward me, and that I didn't have to tell them more than one time. Now, that was a fluke, right? That doesn't always happen. But I genuinely attribute that to something Brian told me when Hudson was little. He says, discipline is like putting money in the bank, and you have to do it consistently. And over time, you'll get those dividends. And I think sometimes with discipline in particular, we look at it as like if it was a microwave. I just push 2 buttons, hit start, and then that's it. And I'll get my popcorn in no time. Right? But it's those relationships where we're able to allow older men and women to speak into our lives and point out things that might offend us or that might rub us the wrong way. But hopefully it's spoken in love, knowing that they truly want to see us succeed in stewarding the lives of our kids. And I think that's at the heart in some regards to Titus 2 and what this class is they want to see younger parents do well and raise their kids in the fear and admonition of the Lord. I had something in here about wisdom, how much better it is to acquire wisdom than find gold. Lord willing, the older saints that we have here have acquired wisdom, and they will pass it on to future generations, and we're part of that future generation that they should pass it on to. But if we don't build and create relationships with these older saints in our church body, we're just squandering gold. He who walks with the wise will be wise, but the friend of fools will suffer harm, right? Who you spend your time with, how they pour into your lives, will affect. And then I imagine they're going to camp out on this passage. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, right? And daughters. And shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. Right? That's what we're called to do as parents. The question is how. And I imagine that this is what this class is going to be about. It's going to be about practically, how do we do that? So, all right, fathers, don't provoke your kids. That's important. As you're doing that, don't do that. Cool. That's my forward. A little more emotional than I thought it was going to be. I didn't love that. Okay, now, the next part I'm calling an appendix. It's at the end of the book, but we're doing it today. And I'm calling it Walk by the Way, teaching them diligently with music, because I love music. And we just came from a music conference earlier last week, and I meant to bring my hymnal with me, and I forgot. But that's okay. I doubled up there. So, some old dead guys. Wait, what?
You mean that massive pile of hymnals over there?
No, I brought a special hymnal. Yeah. Technically I didn't bring it, somebody brought it to me, but I knew it was coming. I'll talk about that later. Old dead guys, talking about music. Martin Luther, you can read what he says. I know you guys all know how to read. Another old dead guy. Slow down, I'm sorry. I'll take my time. It's good. So let me recover while you guys read. Okay. So I am passionate about music. I think it is it's God's gift to us. It's one way in which we get to worship God. It is not the only way we get to worship God, but it is incredibly enjoyable, at least to me, and I hope to you as well. I was learning earlier this week that Sunday school classes in churches actually started out of teaching kids how to sing in the church, how to sing out of hymnals. This is something that we've lost as a church. Most kids look at a hymnal and think it's a book to color in, or just something not to touch because you're going to break it and then mom and dad have to replace it. But I think it's a helpful tool. Brian had me read to the congregation, and I forgot what passage, but what I remember was that there was a song that I've listened to 1,000 times because the kids listen to it in the car. It's that CD. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. Slugs and Bugs Sing the Bible. Man, how great is it to have a tool that we can use to help instill God's word into the hearts of our children. We were listening to Johnny Erickson Tata. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. She's a quadriplegic who, when she was a teenager, dove into some kind of a pond. I don't know. She dove into some water, and she broke her neck and became a quadriplegic. And in her testimony in the video that we watched, she talked about how the songs that she learned as a child helped her get through some of the darkest times. In particular, she was talking about hymns of the faith. And I thought that was so powerful, like that we can equip our children that even in their darkest moments, that they're able to recount the songs that they sang, that they've learned through church, that they've been taught at home. And so I want to encourage you to invest in your children's lives through music that instructs, right? We can obviously turn on the radio and listen to, I don't know, what's the radio station? I'm looking at you, Sarah. You used to.
Like what, like the Christian station?
No, the non-Christian ones.
Oh, like WDVR.
Perfect. You could turn that on, ton of fun music, people could bounce around. It'd be a great time. But it doesn't instruct our children in the way that we would want them to. They'll learn things, they'll learn songs. Man, the amount of little kids who know words to songs is incredible, right? Consider maybe your life before Christ and the amount of, maybe you like country songs. How many country songs you can sing to? Actually, there's this YouTube channel, and the kids love to watch me and Carla try to play it. So they play a snippet of the song, and you have to guess what the name of the song is. And Carla does really well with 90s Christian music. I don't. But how many NSYNC songs do you know? And it's you have that in your memory, right? You go to a restaurant and a song is playing and you're like, oh, I know that song, and you can sing to it. You maybe haven't heard it in 10 years, but man, you know all the words. But think about how powerful that is. And we have the opportunity and the ability to saturate the minds of our children with God's word. Another one would be the Getty hymn, where they take songs like that we would sing in our hymnal and they just make them a little more fun for the kids. Sometimes I think they sound better than the adult versions. It's another excellent resource. One that Carla introduced me to when we were dating was Walking with the Wise, which is one of the Sovereign Grace kids albums. And there's a song in there called A True Friend. Your kid is having issues knowing what it means to be a true friend, sharing things like that. Man, what a great song for them to be able to think through what a true friend is, right? Not somebody that necessarily is just giving things to other people so that they'll like them, but thinking biblically about how to make friends and how to be a good friend. A couple of months ago, maybe even a couple of years ago, Pastor Gary introduced the church to Theology, which is this book that you can kind of read through, and it is like a systematic doctrine book that's meant for children, so you can go through the different theological things. And Sovereign Grace Music made an album to that. So not only can they be thinking and dwelling on those things, but they can also be singing those things as well. And then there's a new one that I came across, which is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Shane and Shane, but I would say this is more for like 9 and up in terms of what kind of music they're into. It's a little bit more rock and roll and less nursery rhymey. But it's just excellent, rich music that we could be pouring in and saturating the lives of our kids. And then eventually they get older, right? Some of you have older kids who maybe don't like the boppy stuff. So how do you then help them navigate through music? Because now they've developed a taste, what they like, right? Do they like country music? Some kids like rap, that rap music. So I was thinking through this because I had somebody ask me about video games for their kid, and I was like, I don't have a list of video games that I think are appropriate for children. Like, I don't have that. I don't play the kind of video games that their kid might be into. But I thought, what are solid principles that'll help as you're considering these things? I am convinced, and Brian is at fault for convincing me of this, is as a parent, you should be playing whatever games your kids are playing. You need to know what it is. And so I would say similarly, you need to be listening to the music your kids are listening to. You need to know what is saying, and I don't want to be a stick in the mud and say your kids should only be listening to Christian music and that's it. That's not realistic. They go to parties, they go to football games, they have music on, right? They're going to hear things. Their friends will introduce them to stuff. And so it's so important that you're hearing and listening to what they're listening to. It provides excellent opportunities for conversation. Oh, what do you think that means? Right? I was talking to, I think it was to Carla, and I'm going to get to speak in chapel at Hudson's school in a couple of weeks. And I'm teaching on Samson. And I said, what am I supposed to tell these kindergartners that, Samson played around with, I used the word soiled dove. And Hudson just looks at me and goes, "What's a soiled dove?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a dirty bird. Let's move on," right? I didn't explain it to him, and there was too many littles around too to have that conversation. But they're listening and they're attentive. They hear. They have questions. They might not necessarily ask you the questions, but hopefully you're cultivating a relationship where you are the one that they feel comfortable going to say, "Hey, what is that?" They said that. What does that mean? I would encourage you to share a breadth of music with them. Sometimes they get into I only like this kind of music. To expose them to different kinds of music is helpful. What?
What's a soiled dove?
This is going on the internet. I'm not going to talk about that. Yeah. And know who's putting out the music. Right now, if you listen to Christian radio, there are about 3 major bands that are putting out the music, and none of them are theologically great. Bethel, Elevation. I was going to say Evolution. That's not right. And Hillsong. It's the big three. And now they're the big three, but they've like muddied the water. And so they're not coming out as this is our church. They're just people from those churches that are putting out music, and then the music is going out. So you don't know. So paying attention to who they are, it's not difficult to go down a rabbit trail and get into some stuff where you're just like, wait, they teach that you can, soak up power in the grave and then go to hospitals and heal people. Bethel does teach that. And it's not hard to find that on the internet if you start to connect the dots. So just be aware of what they're consuming. I would encourage you to curate the music that they're listening to. Spotify is wonderful. I used to be yes.
So, what's your line there? Like, so are you like Martin Luther was, anti-Semitic? Do we not sing any of his songs?
That's right. A Mighty Fortress is out.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I have a lot of opinions on that. They're my opinions. I do have the floor, but I want to preface that they're my opinions. I tend to not want to give money to organizations and people that I don't support. Martin Luther's dead, so I'm not giving him any money. But these people, a lot of it is a money-making machine, and I want to be careful too, because, man, some of those songs are good and they're catchy, and they're fun to listen to. And so I have to be wise. Sometimes I might consume something that I don't necessarily want my kids to consume. And so just kind of trying to figure out the difference there as well between where do I want my money going and what do I want my kids consuming. So that's kind of my short answer. Yes?
Kind of along these lines, it just made me think, I've had conversations with other young moms that are like kind of complaining, oh, my kids just want to listen to Frozen all day, or, like these songs, and they're on repeat in our house. I always kind of push back on that, like, you're still the parent. You're the one putting the song on.
This is true.
Not that you are like harsh and we're never, maybe you make that decision.
No,
We're never listening to Fluff, but you're the one making those choices, and you at some point have to decide, what do I want to fill my kid's head with? And if you give them Fluff all the time, they're going to want Fluff. But if you start them young with better content, better songs or whatever, that's what they grow up, and that's what they're used to.
Totally. In fact, I have a little bone to pick with my wife about this. She, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, plays Christmas music to my children, not during the Christmas season. And one of Nora's favorite songs is a Christmas hymn, and I'm just like in the car with them. I'm like, why are we listening to Christian Christmas music? It's like June. It's like, so yes, you can pick, and hopefully they are liking and being drawn toward the things of the Lord. What's the song that Nora likes? The Christmas violin song?
No, hold on.
Check your Spotify playlist. As she does that, and it's funny to me. And so each kid has kind of created their own Spotify playlist about music that they like. And like right now they're on a Phineas and Ferb kick, which is it's so funny to me. I remember being in college and enjoying Phineas and Ferb. But that's not the only music that they listen to. So we want to be balanced. There's time to have fun and enjoy things. And within that, we also want to incorporate things that will be encouraging to them in their walk with the Lord. Hopefully they are walking with the Lord. Yes, Dan?
I think I want to caution all of us right now, because I'm hearing some statements of what we want to fill our kids' minds with. I downloaded a game a couple days ago because I was like, oh, I like these games where I have to figure out math, this, whatever. And it ended up being like one of the early video games where all of the people that are helping you are scantily dressed. And it wasn't part of the main game. It was like the in-between things. And I was like, oh, I'm liking the game. And then I found myself thinking, oh, I wouldn't want my kid looking at this, and I realized it's not good for me to look at this. And so I just encourage you to make sure that we're being, what's the word I want? We're being real. That if it's words that would be damaging to my kids, it's damaging to me. And sometimes we don't even think about it. I think I was married 10 years before I understood that one of the 70 songs, Afternoon Delight. I'm like, oh, wow, I understand what that means now. And, sorry.
No, I think,
Lovely song.
again, it's
But I'm just saying, let's be careful that we're not going, this is what's good for them,
yeah.
but we don't think about what's in our lives. Because then our kids see a double standard, and I think then we're setting them up to fall.
No, I think that's helpful. I think that, so something Karen said was, we're still the parents. And so we dictate what's watched in our home, what's listened to in our home. And so, I would say if you are regularly listening to music in your home, you shouldn't have to change it just because a kid walks into the room. Now, there are things that are maybe not necessarily age appropriate that might be okay for adults to watch. That as they get older, they can, we wouldn't necessarily have to stop it at that point. You'd have to use wisdom within that. But we do have to be consistent. I would say, I don't know when the last time I listened to the radio in my car, like the actual radio. Spotify's playing, and it's usually whatever music I'm doing for church next week. So the kids regularly are seeing me listen to that, and then they'll see me come to the church and play that music. There's a consistency there. When we're on road trips and, we'll mix it up. It's not just all of one thing, and they'll see Carla and I jamming out to a Christian song just as much as another song that we think is okay for kids to listen to. And I think that's okay, right? Because we're being consistent in front of them. We're not creating a tiered system of good for me, but not for you type thing. And so I think considering those things will be helpful as you kind of navigate that. I like listening to rap music too. So sometimes when I'm fighting with the kids in the living room, wrestling, not actually fighting, I have a playlist of rap music that I play, and Trip Lee's on there. And it's kind of weird fighting to a hymn, and wrestling to a hymn. But if it's a Trip Lee album, I know what he's talking about. I know what he's saying. I know that he's trying to point us toward Christ. I don't have an issue wrestling with my kid while I'm listening to Trip Lee. Forrest Frank has been a big, hey, let's have fun, let's be poppy, fun to listen to enjoy together. It's great. I'm not into country, but I was I need to find a country version of this. Sorry, I am into country, but not pop country. People really like her, Ann Wilson. She's been recommended to me to listen to. Not my style, but if your kid likes country, this might be someone, that you can play when you're wrestling with your kids, but don't want to listen to a hymn necessarily. And along with listening, I'd also encourage our parents to have your kids be involved in music. Now, not everyone is a musician, but there are so many benefits to having your kids attempt to learn how to play an instrument. One, it opens it up for ministry. I've never been to a church that couldn't use another musician. Even in Nashville, surprisingly, because most of the actual musicians don't want to play on Sunday morning. So there's that aspect of it, right? You get to teach them that they're able to learn something to use for the glory of God. And I think that's huge. And I would say for our two teachers, Dan and Jim, they've modeled that for us. The Rowley kids and the Anderson kids have all ministered to our church body through music in one way or another. And we've benefited from that as a church body, and that's been great. And you have both Jim and Dan modeling that for their kids as they've led our congregation in singing. Now I understand not everybody's a musician. Totally get it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't use music as a tool to help disciple our kids. Hudson does not love the piano. He's actually pretty good at it, but he doesn't love it. And if I were to give him the opportunity to quit, he'd do it in a heartbeat. But I view it in two ways. One, I've never met an adult who was like, man, I wish my parents would have let me quit piano. I've never met an adult say that. It's always been the opposite. I wish my parents would have kept me learning an instrument, whether it's piano or whatever. But the second thing is he's learning how to do something that he has no desire in doing, and having to put in time, energy, and effort in something he has no desire to do. And that's valuable. Right? Think about it. It's hard to do things when you're tired. It's hard to do things after a long day. And to then build up the discipline to be able to push past that and just get something done, even when you don't want to, is huge. I mean, how many times do we find ourselves having to do things that we don't want to do? And so I find it as just a helpful tool to just instill that in him, a good work ethic, right? He knows 15 minutes a day, he's going to sit at the piano. And unfortunately for him, I know music, so I know if he's faking it or if he's actually doing the work. And that just provides an opportunity to disciple his heart. I don't want to do this, but mom and dad are asking me to do it. And I need to learn how to do it with a good attitude. Now, I told him that when he's 18, he's welcome to quit. But he's excited about learning how to play the trumpet. He wants to play the drums. He's interested in playing the guitar. I'm not saying that this is necessarily what you have to do. Nora's 6. She might not learn how to play the piano, but she's learning how to play the violin. And she's been playing it for 3 years. And her work ethic is different than her brother's. I tell her to do like 10 minutes at the violin, and it's like 30 minutes later, and she's like, oh, I lost track of time. Right? It's different, and each kid is different. But I think music provides an opportunity, a window where you can kind of see, okay, where's my kid at? Where are they growing in these particular areas? And then these are things that they can then bring to church for the sake of ministry, right? Youth group has a band. And when I was there, we figured out how to use whatever instrument somebody had. And, hopefully, as they get older, we can figure out how to use them in a Sunday morning service. I mean, hey, right now we got 2 flutes and a violin in like a guitar group. That's fantastic. I want more, right? I want there to be no space, no standing space up there with all the instruments that we get to use because it's awesome. So that's my appendix on music and trying to teach your children and using music as a tool practically in that effort. So, forward appendix, yes. Yeah, in June. It's bananas. They are true all year long. I'm just saying, Christmas music should not be played until after Thanksgiving and up until Christmas. So, so let you guys in a fun fact. I ruffled a couple feathers last year because I didn't do Christmas songs on the last Sunday of December. People did not like that. But I was like, Christmas is done. Let's sing the other joys of the Lord. Okay, I got 11:13 on the clock, 11:14, so I guess you guys get out 2 minutes early. Hopefully that was an encouragement, and hopefully you guys will be ready for the practical stuff that Dan and Jim will bring us next week. Could somebody pray for us? Dave, pray for us.
Father, Lord, I thank you for this time we're able to have to think about how we're seeking you as we parent and the materials that we're consuming and how important it is that we don't hold double standards. Lord, I pray that you would help us and guide us in this class to be attentive and to really enrich each other. Lord, just help us in these ways. In your name I pray.
Amen.